Good afternoon, everyone, and I hope you have your attention, full attention for the next 10 minutes, where I will be talking about symbolic AI, which some of you might recognize as a term, but if you don't, I'm sure after the 10 minutes you will get a better idea what it is. And AI, artificial intelligence, embraces quite a few different concepts, and symbolic AI is just one of them. So if you've been exposed to machine learning, deep learning lately, you should also give some room for symbolic AI as well and see how it plays with the previous terms or it doesn't. So I'll let you be the judge by the end of the presentation. So let me start the presentation with a picture quiz. So what do you think this picture represents? So the slide is entitled Non-Symbolic AI, and indeed, this truck comes from a National Transportation Safety Board in the US of A, and it looks a lot like a truck, doesn't it? But I'm afraid Tesla as a car did not recognize it's a truck, but given the current speculation, I believe Tesla thought it is a bridge. So when the truck was turning left, the Tesla didn't quite apply the brakes, but actually went full speed towards the truck. And the reason now, given the years, 1.5 years of deep studies by NTSB reveals that it may have mistaken it as a bridge because there was some blue light underneath, so it must have been a bridge, so it's okay to go full speed forward. So I guess this non-symbolic AI became clear already before the launch that there's some limits to applying deep learning technologies and pattern recognition. So finding an answer as to why did you think you shouldn't apply the brakes, it might take a long time, 1.5 years, to figure out why it wasn't applied. Well, here's another one. We're hearing stories from healthcare, how deep learning will assist doctors to make good decisions. And here's a picture from Wikipedia, courtesy of Mr. Keval Mistry. And it's about a leg that had to be amputated. So once you go and ask the black box as to why do you compute, my dear friend, why do you recommend that this should be amputated, the answer will be numeric. So it might tell you, well, you know what, it's 0.82. And the doctor will say, fair enough, let's amputate. So I believe we agree that the demand for explanations, or is there a good noun word for it, exponentiality, is needed in some of these environments. So the symbolic reasoning, symbolic AI does have an added value aspect to it. So a rule which is not constructed by a computer, but by a doctor, a human expert who understands the domain and knows that if there's additional data about this patient, that it's a male, could be me, oh dear, age is more than 45, ooh, again might be me. And in fact, the diagnosis is something called gas gangrene. I'm not a medical doctor, even though I'm a doctor. I think this is the reason why a leg would be amputated, and the diagnosis would be due to a bacteria found in the patient, and the evidence in the picture would then convince the kind of human doctor that, well, indeed, I concur. Let's do the amputation. But there's kind of explanation behind the black box as to why the recommendation was reached. And this is indeed required in some of these domains. I'm not saying this rule is a kind of perfect one. It's pretty much imaginary from Wikipedia sources again, but I think you got the point. So the human beings can bring the assistance to the computer, which can then either assist our work or make automated decisions. Amputating without human decisions sounds a bit scary, all right. So that's medical domain. Let's move on to another domain, natural language processing. What does it have to do with symbolic AI? And indeed, if you look for strings and look for information, not just strings that you would like to appear in the Google search that you typically do, the symbolic word can bring out the underlying concepts or symbols within the text. And if you think this sounds science fiction, how big an investment will that be if I wanted to gain value from the intersection of NLP and symbolic AI? Well, the good news is that those of you operating in Finland, there's lots of publicly available ontologies that you can download, configure software with it, and see what value they add. And let me just show you a very obvious use case, semantic search. So on the left, you can see a search box where I have written a search keyword autonkuljettaja, that's car driver. For those of you who wouldn't understand Finnish, and if I was to look for a job vacancy for a car driver, the Google kind of search would operate by bringing you job ads which contain those characters, right? Autonkuljettaja in the results. But what happens in the symbolic AI world is that we actually get vacancies about jobs that do not necessarily contain that string, but are actually related to the concept of a car driver. And here we see, with the arrow, I've made it very explicit that there's something about a cab driver, something about a truck driver, and those are the vacancies you could now apply for just by using a completely different concept in your search. So the good news is that this is already available technology today. You can go and try it out yourself and apply it in your domain, not necessarily into job vacancies. So getting towards the kind of recommendations when you should consider using symbolic AI, is this a black and white world? You either use symbolic one or use these black box neural networks which you need to teach. I think there's some space where they both can live at the same time. So first of all was the obvious one where human users can export their brains, so to speak, into rule-based systems used typically by symbolic AI environments. And of course, if you want to quickly see what the rule changes will affect your results, I mean, you can skip the training bit that typically requires time. And what I'm hearing from data scientist world, that if you get a nice job in the media space as a data scientist, 80% of your time is actually going to processing the data before you can apply any of these wonderful AI tools. So there's lots of work involved in just preparing the learning data sets before you get the value out of the ML, DL boxes. So there's some more flexibility, speed, how quickly you can get these new rules into production. But now these two, kind of, if you think that the black box of a neural network deep learning is here in the middle, you can think of using symbolic AI as a pre-processing step. Which model we should be applying for this domain? Let's make this more concrete. Sounds a bit vague, right? So if you had a Tesla driving in the US, you might have a model which is trained to not stop the car at the red lights if you're turning right. But if you take Tesla to Finland, well, you might apply a different model, which you download over the net, kind of over the air, I guess, to the new Teslas in Finland, which then would indeed stop you at the red lights and wouldn't let you turn right when the red's on. So model selection is an interesting space where you could apply symbolic reasoning. And now the final result, when you have lots of black boxes providing outputs like amputate or break the car, those actually construct a symbolic model about the user. Could be in a chat environment where you ask the user a question or they write something as an initial query to your chat window. That could be processed by deep learning to get an idea that this typical question relates to a certain product. Well, then we know that this is either a prospective customer for that product or it's actually about a reclamation or instructions to how to operate the product. So we're building a symbolic representation about the user kind of accumulatively. I will actually challenge you to come and talk with me more on the exhibit floor if you still think that you could do this with neural networks and recurrent neural networks where you, as a function of time, you accumulate the model in a black box, but I would say symbolic AI has a role to play in that space as well. So I will conclude this slide. I invite you all to pay a visit to Profium stand to pose any open questions or any ideas this would have given to your head. So thank you very much for your attention.